Welcome to Frequently Asked France Questions, the series where I teach you things I've learned about immigrating to France the hard way so that you don't have to. In today's episode, what is French top-up insurance? One of the many great things about living in France is that for legal residents, a lot of health costs are heavily subsidized by the government. If you've ever looked at the taxes that French workers paid and thought, gee, that's high, yeah, sure, paying taxes isn't fun, but this is part of the reason why breaking a leg in France won't end in you filing for bankruptcy. All legal residents in France are covered by the national health insurance, which is called Caisse Primaire d'Assurance Maladie, or CPAM. There are other cases where people who've never paid social taxes in France might still receive coverage, like for example when someone is engaged to a French person or married to them. This is under a different system called Protection Universelle Maladie, or PUMA. Meow. Even though the healthcare services in France are heavily subsidized, there are still situations where the entire amount is not covered. For example, it's not uncommon to have a small out-of-pocket expense when seeing a general practitioner or getting some medicines. To give you an example, if you go to see a GP in France and their service fee is around 25 euros, the national insurance will cover around 70% of that, so there'll still be 6.50 euros out of pocket that you will have to pay. And there is another form of insurance that will take care of this gap. If you're a legal resident of France, you can also have an additional top-up insurance policy called a mutuel. The general idea of a mutuel is that it pays for the out-of-pocket expenses that aren't covered by the national insurance, or at least some of them. People from other countries with socialized healthcare would probably be familiar with this kind of insurance policy. You don't have to have a French carte vitale to have a mutuel, but it's highly recommended because this allows for the electronic transmission of funds directly to you. Without a carte vitale, if you need any form of refund, you're going to have to do it manually, which can be an absolute nightmare. Every salaried worker in France is required to have a mutuel, and their employer is obliged to pay 50% of the insurance premiums. However, they're only obliged to pay this amount if they stay with their group policy. Some employers do actually pay the full amount of the premium, and it's also common for spouses, dependents, and children to be added to the mutuel insurance policy as well. In fact, if you are in a couple and one of you has a better mutuel, you can actually choose to go with their plan instead of the one offered by your employer. It's also worth mentioning that the largest market for mutuel insurance policies is for retired people. So even if you are enjoying the twilight years of your life, it's still worth having a mutuel. If you are not a salaried employee, there are still some circumstances where it is highly recommended that you get a mutuel insurance policy, like for people who are self-employed or those who are starting small businesses. A great example of why you should aim to have a mutuel in these situations is if you are ever hospitalized. Without a mutuel, you could be liable to pay fees up front, even if they are in the thousands and even in the case of an emergency. Now, it's very rare that in France, a hospital would refuse services without seeing some cash first, but having a mutuel fixes any of these problems. If you live in France but don't work here, you don't have to have a mutuel. But like with any insurance-related issues, it's better to be safe than sorry. Just remember that you do have to have a French social security number to have a mutuel insurance policy. To take out a mutuel insurance policy, you will need three things: identification, bank details, and an attestation de droit, which is basically proof of your affiliation with the French CPAM. Some great news: France actually operates under a very strict code of ethics when it comes to insurance policies. So insurers are not allowed to refuse to give you an insurance policy or charge extra premiums because of pre-existing health conditions. So if you do have pre-existing health conditions, you don't have to sift through policies to find one that's not going to shaft you for being honest about your health. In fact, disclosing your medical history isn't even required. Choosing a policy is as simple as looking at what they offer, seeing what's best for you, and what premiums fit within your budget. Mutuels really are essential right now, especially with new regulations like 100% Santé, which ensures that people who are covered by CPAM and mutuels will have options for extras that are covered 100% by both. In the case of something as simple as getting a filling at the dentist, it might mean that you have to get the old-fashioned metal one instead of the one that a Kardashian might choose, but you at least have something covered for free. Take it from a fellow immigrant, having a mutuel is an absolute must if you live in France. There's no feeling better than waking up in the morning with a toothache or some weird new health condition and knowing confidently that it's not going to cost you an arm and a leg to get it fixed. So if you don't have a Mutuelle, get online and check out one today.